In this lecture, you will learn what AWS Lambdas are and where they fit into AWS serverless platform. The serverless platform is comprised of number of services from compute to messaging to S3, Lambdas and more. AWS Lambda is a compute service that allows us to write our own code which will be run in response to the events that happen in other resources or other components. When the event source triggers our Lambda functions, the code that we write will be run and our Lambda function can interact with other components in the ecosystem if required. Just like how we have a main method in standalone Java components, the Lambda functions we create will have a handler function. This handler function can take different inputs and return back different types of responses, which you will learn in detail in lectures later on. And the security here is very simple. Whichever resource or component is triggering the event will have a IAM resource policy. So we give permissions to these components to trigger the Lambda function through a IAM resource policy. And the Lambda function itself, when it works with other components, will define a IAM role and assign permissions to our Lambda to use these components. It could be DynamoDB, it could be SNS or any other component within the AWS ecosystem. The permissions will be given through a IAM role. We will be exploring these two in detail in lectures later on as well. So simply remember, a Lambda function brings in custom code into the serverless platform where there are various other components that can be used. These components trigger our Lambda function, and when the Lambda function is triggered, the handler function which we write will be executed. So as a Java developer or as a Java web application developer, you can bring in all your coding experience and best practices to Lambda programming, and all the code will not go into just one single handler function. You can create various classes just like how you do in your web applications. You can create layers like controllers which will handle the events, services where all the business logic goes, then the integration layer or the DAO layer which will communicate with other components in the ecosystem. You can also bring in your non-functional requirement knowledge like how to handle logging within your code, where you can use third-party libraries like log4j and also handle errors. There are different ways in which we can handle errors while working with Lambdas. We will learn all that here. So to summarize, AWS Lambdas fall under the compute service. Even if you go to AWS console, go to services, see under this compute, you will see Lambda. It allows us to create our own custom code that will be triggered when events happen in these other components, and in response it can produce output. In the process of producing that output and handling that event, it can use other components within the ecosystem. And when it comes to security, these components should have the permissions to invoke our Lambda function, which is controlled through a IAM resource policy. And the Lambda function itself will need a certain role which will have permissions to access whichever resources it wants. And as a developer, you can bring in all your experience and knowledge to create those functions, not just a single function, but you can create multiple classes, spread your logic and code across these layers, and also work with non-functional requirements like logging, error handling, scaling, security, and much more.